Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling one of the biggest, oldest, and most profound questions humanity has ever asked. Does God exist? But here's the twist. For this, we're going to set aside scripture, we're going to set aside personal experience. Instead, we are looking at the purely logical arguments that philosophers have been building for centuries to see if reason alone can actually make the case. So that really is the central question for us today. Are faith and reason, totally separate things? Or can the tools of logic, the same tools we use for math and science, help us explore this ultimate mystery? It's a pretty fascinating journey, starting from what we can observe and reasoning our way to what might lie beyond. Okay, let's dive right in. So first up, we're going to tackle the classical arguments. Now, these are rooted in something called metaphysics, which just means they aren't about lab experiments or digging up old texts. Nope, they start with really fundamental observations about reality itself, and then just follow a chain of pure logic.
All right, so the first proof, and this one goes way back to Aristotle, starts with something we see literally every second of every day: change. But in this philosophical sense, change means something really specific. It's the process of a potential becoming real. So a block of marble has the potential to become a statue. The sculptor is what actualizes that potential. And here's the key idea: something can't give a quality it doesn't already have. A cold burner can't make coffee hot.
And this is where that simple idea really builds into something powerful. If every change needs a changer, an actualizer, then what's actualizing that? And what's actualizing that? The argument says this chain of causes happening right now can't just go on forever. That would be like a train with an infinite number of cars but no engine. You absolutely have to have a foundational cause at the beginning of the chain, something that can cause all the change without itself being changed, a being of pure actuality with zero unfulfilled potential, the unmoved mover. Now, what's so cool is that the unmoved mover is just one logical path. This table here shows a bunch of other arguments that start from completely different places, but somehow they all arrive at a remarkably similar conclusion. For example, let's take a look at the Neo-Platonic argument. It looks at anything around you, your phone, a tree, and says, hey, that's made of parts, but those parts can't just hold themselves together. So what unifies them? The argument says you can't have an infinite regress of things holding other things together. Ultimately, you must arrive at something that is absolutely simple, not made of parts at all, which holds everything else together. They called this the one. Or how about the Augustinian argument? It starts with abstract truths, like the fact that 2 + 2 will always equal 4. So where does an eternal truth like that exist? It can't just be floating in nothing. The argument concludes that it must exist as an idea inside an eternal, unchanging mind. So you see, whether you start with things being made of parts, or with timeless ideas, or the very nature of existence itself, all these roads of pure reason seem to point to a single, simple, eternal source. All right, so those were the arguments from pure reason, kind of working from the inside out, if you think about it. But what happens when we start looking for clues in the actual world around us? Let's shift gears now, moving from pure logic to arguments that pull from the physical cosmos and our own human experience. This one is called the Kalam Cosmological Argument, and it's famous for being so, clean and logical. Step 1 seems pretty intuitive, right? Things don't just pop into existence out of thin air for no reason. And the conclusion in step 3 follows perfectly if the first 2 steps are true. So the whole debate, all of it, really boils down to that second point. Did the universe actually have a beginning? And what's wild? This is where modern science actually steps in and offers some pretty fascinating clues. The leading theory, the Big Bang, points directly to our universe expanding from an initial, super dense state, a definite beginning. And then you have the second law of thermodynamics. Just think of the universe as a giant wind-up clock that's slowly but surely running down. Well, if that clock had been ticking for an infinite amount of time, it would have totally wound down by now. The fact that stars are still burning and we still have usable energy strongly suggests the clock was wound up at some point in the finite past. Now let's look at a totally different kind of evidence. This number on the screen, just look at it. That represents the odds against the universe's fundamental constants being set just by random chance to a value that allows life to exist. To call this number astronomical doesn't even begin to cover it. This is the heart of what's called the fine-tuning argument. This observation that our universe appears to be balanced on an impossibly thin knife's edge for life to even be a possibility. So what does this all mean? We're kind of left with 2 main explanations, right? How do you explain this incredible fine-tuning? Was it just an unimaginable cosmic lottery win against impossible odds? Or, as the other column suggests, was it the product of intelligent design? The argument basically says that design is a much more sensible explanation for this level of precision than just saying, well, we got lucky. Okay, let's shift gears completely. Let's move from the vastness of the cosmos to our own conscience. The moral argument starts with a statement just like this one. Now, most people, almost everyone, no matter where you're from or what you believe, would hear that and say, yeah, that's just wrong. It feels like more than just an opinion. It feels objectively true. And that leads to the big question. If moral truths like cruelty is wrong are actually real and objective, where do they come from? The argument suggests that just saying, oh, it's social conditioning or it's just evolution, doesn't quite explain our deep sense of a higher law that we feel we ought to obey. It proposes that for there to be a real objective moral law, there has to be a transcendent moral lawgiver, a being who is perfectly good and acts as the ultimate standard for goodness itself. Okay, so we've walked through arguments from pure logic, from cosmology, and from morality. We've gathered all these different pieces. So what happens when we put them all together? If we take them seriously, what kind of being do they all point to? What does the final portrait actually look like? What's fascinating is that the conclusion isn't some vague, impersonal life force. Each of these proofs adds another detail to the sketch. Think about it. The unmoved mover has to be eternal and unchanging. The simple being can't be made of parts, so it must be immaterial, not physical. The divine intellect has to be all-knowing. The cause of a universe that's so finely tuned must be incredibly powerful and intelligent, and the source of objective morality has to be perfectly good. When you put them all together, they don't just point to a first cause, they build this cumulative case for a single being with the classical attributes of God. But, and this is a really crucial point, it's important to understand what these arguments are and what they aren't. The goal here isn't to replace faith or, prove God in a lab. The idea is to show that belief doesn't have to be a leap in the dark. They aim to demonstrate that faith can actually be a rational, intellectually solid choice, not just a gut feeling or a blind impulse. And that really leaves us with a final thought. All these arguments, in their own way, are trying to build a logical bridge from the world we know and can see to the possibility of a transcendent creator. They suggest reason can walk us right up to the edge of the river. So the question for you is this. If reason can build that bridge, is faith the final step you take to get to the other side? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us.